Gone Girl is the latest film by director David Fincher, who brought us such films as Seven, Fight Club, Panic Room, Zodiac, etc. And it's written by Gillian Flynn, based on her own novel. It stars Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike. Now, the film itself, before going in, I hadn't read the book. I had a general idea of what it was about. Now, the plot follows the character, to begin with, of Nick Dunn, played by Ben Affleck, who wakes up on the morning of his 5th wedding anniversary to find that his wife Amy, played by Rosamund Pike, is missing. The film then follows the sort of media circus storm and uproar, whatever you want to call it, that surrounds Nick while he's making appeals for Amy to come home. And it really goes into sort of how the media treats these sorts of cases, and how the media can sort of influence public perception of the events and public opinion on the people involved. Now, that is very much the film that's advertised in the trailer, and I will say now, I'm not going to spoil anything to do with this movie, and that's about as far into the plot as I can go without spoiling anything, because what was a pleasant surprise for me was the sort of big reveal in this movie comes halfway through. Only the first half of the movie is what is advertised in the trailers, and the second half is very much almost a different film. Now, that was something that I have to say I really enjoyed while I was watching it, because I do appreciate it when filmmakers can sort of pull off a rug pull like that and sort of alter your perception of what the film is and what's going on. I like it when films do a 180 halfway through. So that was something I enjoyed. Now, I want to say, sort of full disclosure, I really enjoyed this film. It's 2.5 hours long, but when it finished, I honestly felt like I was about halfway through and I could have watched another 2.5 hours. The pacing of this film is so good that you don't feel the running time at all. And I've read some criticisms that say, you know, they feel like the film is a bit flabby and scenes could have been cut or trimmed. I disagree. It was 2.5 hours long, but I could have actually done with another half hour, sort of fleshing out certain character motivations and also sort of plot devices and character beats as well. So basically, I'll go into sort of what I liked about the film to begin with. The performances are great. Now, Ben Affleck as the lead, Nick. Ben Affleck's an actor who can give a great performance or be terrible in something, and I'm so relieved to say that he's great in this. And he is perfectly cast as Nick, who is a character that essentially one minute the public can loathe and just dislike in general, and then feel sympathetic towards, and you know, vice versa. Public opinion of him can sort of turn very quickly and very abruptly, and you know, that has happened to Ben Affleck in real life in the past. You know, he was half of Benefit, and then more recently the sort of Batman news as well. Ben Affleck is used to having the public turn on him sort of at the drop of the hat, and I feel like that really informed his take on Nick. You know, he is just trying to, as we see him in the first half of the film when he's making these appeals for Amy to come home, you know, we see that he is trying to do his best, but he's going about it sort of the wrong way. And it's really interesting, sort of coupled with that, is how the media sort of treats the character of Nick, you know, whether it's getting a photo of him smiling in front of a poster of his missing wife and stuff like that. His performance, coupled with the script and how the script focuses on media attention, really do make the character of Nick quite sort of interesting and very sort of timely as well. I feel like this is something that we see on the news unfortunately quite regularly with sort of cases like this. So I thought that was very interesting. That's not to say that the character of Nick is likeable, because he isn't. I don't really think that any well, either of the lead characters in this are particularly likeable. I mean, the film at its heart is about a very toxic relationship and toxic marriage that is told largely through subjective flashbacks. But it's almost like a film about that relationship with a mystery thriller wrapped around it. Rosamund Pike as Amy is definitely the standout of the movie. She is pretty great, you know, she's given the sort of meatiest role, and it's, you know, considering that she isn't sort of given as much screen time to begin with, you know, a lot of what we know about her is told from other characters' perspectives. She really takes the role and runs with it. Her performance is great, and to be honest, the only other thing I can think I've seen her in is The World's End, in which she wasn't really given much to do, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's nominated for maybe Best Actress for this movie come award season, because she is that good. There are a couple of standouts in the film as well, one of which is Tyler Perry as Nick's lawyer, who is trying to sort of guide him through the media storm and defend his case. This is all during the did he or didn't he kill his wife. Tyler Perry, you know, he plays it really slick and cool. He refers to himself as Elvis, you know. His performance was really good, and he was one that I was actually quite worried about, given comments that he's made about the movie and David Fincher since it was finished. But no, he was great in this. You also have a couple of supporting characters. Nick Dunn has a twin sister, Margot, who is great, and there's also a female detective as well, who is really good in this. There are plenty of supporting characters, all of whom are good. There are no weak links. I've heard criticisms sort of levelled at Neil Patrick Harris as somewhat of a sort of red herring character. If anything, he maybe plays it a little bit too on the nose, a little bit too serious and sinister. But by and large, the cast are great. There are some criticisms of this movie, most of which I can't get into because it'll venture into spoiler territory, but what I will say is the film is tonally inconsistent. It goes from being a sort of really dark black comedy with a very sort of off-kilter sense of humour, which I liked, to being extremely violent and... not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but it doesn't quite sit in tandem with the rest of the movie once it does sort of go to the really dark, violent, sort of messed up places. So the tone is sort of all over the place, but the main criticism I have with this, and this is one that I can't really expand upon in any great detail, but the main thing is the gender politics involved, which... I thought was peculiar, given that it's written by a female writer, Gillian Flynn, but let's just say, staying away from spoilers, that the film does go some way to reinforcing extreme gender stereotypes. And while I was watching it, I was sort of hoping that it would maybe subvert those stereotypes or maybe play with them a little. It didn't do that. It really sort of adhered to those cliches and stereotypes, and to be honest, that's something I could have done without, and that for me is what prevents this from being a great film, because while, you know, I sat there, and I'm not going to lie, it's very entertaining, and I really, really enjoyed it all the way through. I thought it was a great thriller, you know, David Fincher is in his element with this sort of subject matter. The gender politics of it really sort of prevented it from going to that next level for me. Because it is a shame that it just sort of reinforces really archaic stereotypes, but that's my main criticism of the movie, and I can't really sort of expand on that without going into spoiler territory, which I don't want to do, because this is a film that you should see, you know, if as sort of blank as possible. You know, if you've read the book, then you'll know where it's going, but if you haven't read the book, avoid sort of any spoilers, go in fresh, and you'll enjoy it a lot more. I feel like what the film does best in terms of its plot is the rug pulls that it manages to do. The big reveal comes halfway through, but that's not the only one. You know, it does sort of feel like it's telegraphing in its twists and that you can see them come in, and that is sort of true for a couple of them, but a lot of the time the film, you know, leads you down a path and you think you know where it's going, and then it'll flip and do something else and flip back, and it's hard to sort of get a grasp on where the story's going. And to be honest, I think if you sit there trying to figure out where it's going, you're sort of doing it a disservice. I feel like to a certain extent you need to sit back and just enjoy the ride. because you'll probably enjoy it a lot more. You won't be able to guess all the twists, so I wouldn't sort of waste your time. It does go to some really interesting dark places, especially given some sort of recent news reports that have been in the papers, at least over here in England. You know, it feels like a very sort of timely movie, and it's best when it's doing that, and that coupled with, you know, examining how the media treats this sort of subject matter. And to be honest, that's something that I would have liked to have seen more of, or maybe when I say that, it's not very subtle the way it does it. Let's say that everything is very on the nose, but that's just down to Gillian Flynn's style of writing. You know, she is obviously a very talented writer, and the story does go to some very interesting places. Maybe it's lacking subtlety, but to be honest, has David Fincher ever really been a subtle filmmaker? I doubt it. It does feel like a time where a director is sort of perfectly suited to his subject matter. Gone Girl, it's a very rewarding film. It's a very entertaining film. If you're into your sort of mystery thrillers, you'll like it. If you're a fan of David Fincher, you'll love it. You know, it's very, very Fincher-esque in terms of the film itself and its subject matter. It's not a subtle film, and it does thematically have some problems, and he's on a little bit of shaky ground. But overall, I really enjoyed it, and I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up on my top 10 of the year. I know I have a lot of problems with it, but it is a film that inspires debate and argument. And how long has it been since we've had a film that does that? That can, you know, you can talk about and turn over with people and argue about. So from that perspective, it's an interesting, rewarding film, and I would very much recommend it. Although if you do go and see it, try to stay away from spoilers, because going in cold is the best way to see this movie. So Gone Girl is surprising, sometimes in the wrong way, but it is very rewarding, so I'd recommend it.